Hello, everyone. I am particularly excited today. Still waking up, still quite tired, but I'm going to keep this very short. I intended on publishing this episode yesterday, and then I realized what today was. October 12th is exactly a year since I started the podcast, since I published episode 1, and I could not think of a more appropriate guest for the year anniversary than business coach, composer, instructor, podcaster, Mr. Garrett Hope. The reason why is because in 2015, I discovered Garrett's podcast, which at the time was called Composer on Fire. Now it's called the Portfolio Composer Podcast. And Garrett started that podcast because he wanted to help musicians learn how to start their business as a musician. How do you take the craft you learned in college and turn it into a viable income? So after years of doing it, he has hundreds of episodes where he talks to composers, performers, website designers, business coaches, all different types of people to help what he calls people learn the business side of composing. So today's episode 23, on the year anniversary of the Making Noise podcast, features Garrett Hope. As I said, I'm keeping this short today. And part of the reason why is because Garrett has a very exciting announcement, which you're going to hear right now. I hope you enjoy.
Hey there. My name is Dr. Garrett Hope. I am a composer, coach, podcaster, and speaker. I've been focused on building my music business since 2014 and helping others build theirs since 2015. I want to tell you about the second annual Ultimate Music Business Summit we are organizing. It'll take place early January of 2022. There will be dozens of presentations with highly actionable content, all of it available to you so you can start your business, grow your business, and ultimately make more money. Because here's the deal. Unless you earn all of your income from an employer, you are a self-employed small business owner. And if you want to do more than survive, if you want to grow your audience, or if you want to impact more people, you have to think and act like a business owner. And that means this summit is for you. This summit will give you real-world, not theoretical, strategies you can implement immediately. You don't need to be stuck with fear or living in your failures. I promise you, with all the teachers lined up, you will get something you've never thought of before. Even though building a business is hard, no one is promising it's easy. It is possible. You just need the right tools and strategies. Tickets for this virtual event will go on sale soon. To be the first in line and to get more information about the summit, presenters, and more, go to musicsummit.biz. That's musicsummit.biz and add your email to the list.
My name is Adam Quanah, and I am a collaborative composer. Join me in the search for a career in classical music. This is the Making Noise podcast. That's something I haven't yet done that with my podcast, where I link it into a DAW for the audio. Part of the reason why is because I have serious latency issues I use Reaper.
Oh yeah, I use Reaper. I just switched to Reaper.
Oh really?
Yeah.
What spawned the switch?
So there's this a listener of the podcast years ago started supporting me and like helping me, and he's a composer and a professional mixer who lives outside of Atlanta, and he essentially became my mixing coach, and he taught me how to make my mixes better because they were crap, right? So he's like been helping me learn how to improve my audio production, and he then has come on board and he mixes and edits all the podcasts. And he's always like, why are you still in Pro Tools? You don't believe that BS about Pro Tools being the industry standard. And he's always trying to get me to switch to Logic or Reaper. And I'm like, I just don't want to spend $250 or whatever it is to go to Logic. And so I'm like, okay, well, I'll try Reaper. And this spring, I just made the switch because my license expired on Pro Tools. I mean, I still have it, but I was on the renewable every year thing. Mm-hmm. And I had a big project coming up. I did this short film, like a 35-minute one. So I was like, I'm going to dive in and I'm going to do this whole film in Reaper. So I learned Reaper. And I kind of fell in love with it. Like, there's still some things I'm figuring out, and I've recorded a few podcast episodes in it, but it's great. And for $60 for the full license, you can't beat it.
That's not bad at all.
I know. Why do you use Reaper?
I use it because it was the default that I had. Well, not the default. I'm going to fix my camera a little bit. Let's see, that looks a little bit better. I use Reaper because my laptop never had a DAW, or not that laptops come with them, but well, no, I guess Apple does, right? Like Mac comes with Garage or has GarageBand.
Yeah, but does GarageBand really count?
I wouldn't put it in the category. It's a good starter. It does its job for
it has a place. Yes.
Have you heard of the website Coursera?
Yes.
I did a electronic music like course on that years ago.
Okay.
And to do the course, we had to download Reaper. And so I downloaded the trial at the time. And I've had it since. It was like 2015, I think it was. And that's what I've just worked with. So I definitely I do not know like the ins and outs, or like my like what you were saying about mixing and all that stuff. I'm still trying to understand like EQing and when to put on, like, I don't know, a compressor and all this other stuff. And who's the your mixing the guy who does the mixing for you?
So his name's EJ Sadler. And I don't know if he's probably going to feel weird that I'm talking about him. He's that kind of guy. But if you go to, let me just open up one. Any of the podcast episodes, at the very bottom, it'll say mixed by, and it has a link to his studio site. But the guy's just amazing. I mean, he's often on location doing film recording work, like live work, and then he does a whole bunch of post stuff, editing. And one of his big passions actually is Halloween and the macabre. I mean, this guy loves horror. So as a composer, he actually has a side business called Graveyard Tracks, where he's the kind of person that creates the ambient music that goes in like haunted houses. Right?
Oh, that's cool.
And these things are like 20, 30-minute long tracks. And it's like they're all mapped out with like different parts. It's not just ramble. And so right now, actually what I'm working on compositionally is I'm helping him out. So I'm taking some of his thematic ideas for this new track for this Halloween, and I'm going to orchestrate it out into something, at least for a moment, like a full treatment rather than, it's really exciting. It's kind of fun. But his studio is Studio 184. So if you go to studio184.us, that's the guy. And he's just the best.
Is that something that he offers to most people, or is it just an instance for you where he was like, hey, you're a good guy, I want to help you out, Garrett?
Well, I do have the ability to bamboozle people, Adam.
That's a good trait, a good skill to have.
I guess. I think he would be open to the idea. I don't want to speak for him. He doesn't necessarily offer it on his website, though he does have a Save My Mix session. Fix My Mix is what he calls it, where he'll sit down with you and give you a one-on-one and go through your session, like not just listening to the file, but like in whatever DAW you're in, and he'll say, okay, this is why it's sounding like this. These are the things you can do to make it better. And he's got that on his website. So yeah, he's absolutely, I think people should reach out to him.
This is like a skill set that I think is becoming progressively more necessary for musicians. Is
100%.
Recording and mixing. I mean, I know in I think I have it over there. Yeah, in Beyond's Talent in
Angela Beeching's book.
Angela Beeching's books. Like I recall there was a chapter in there that talked about recording and whatnot, but that was in 2008 when it was first published, and I know she's updated it since then, but now, I mean, especially with the pandemic and all the other stuff, it's like understanding hardware and knowing like I was saying before, like how to EQ and stuff like that. Yeah, it seems like such a more important thing that someone like EJ is has that valuable skill set at this time, you know?
Oh yeah. Well, there's no excuse for a musician of any type right now to not know how to get good audio. You have to. Now like the fine, like the finessing details of compression and EQ and all that. That's a skill set that can be learned, and it's a higher level thing. But because, like you said, the pandemic forced most of us to move what we're doing online, meaning we have to use mics and interfaces. And a lot of people are learning this. They learned it for the first time 18 months ago, right? But you still have to know how to set your volume right, how to capture good sound. If you're a teacher on an instrument, where do you place the microphone? And then there's deeper level things when you get to the mixing, like what EQ do you need to do where and when and for how much. And so yeah, yes, I'm in 100% agreement with you, and I think Angela Beeching was right. Whether you're a composer and you're just creating your own demos, you can't just hit export from Sibelius Finale or Dorico. You know, it just never sounds right.
No.
You're a film composer or media, or whether you are a performer. Like, why don't you know how to mix and edit your own recordings or make your own recordings? So I think it's a required skill now.
Yeah, completely. Especially like with performers too.
Yep.
The most, you know, how readily available it is to just put something out there on YouTube or on Facebook or Instagram or whatever, and like having that extra little level of quality to it by knowing how to, okay, I got the mic set in the right position. That's a great start, you know?
Yeah. Yes. Yep. And I guarantee you, most people have the microphones in the wrong place when they're recording their instruments.
Sure. Yeah. Well, my girlfriend plays the oboe, and she purchased this Yeti mic, which I'm now using. She purchased this Yeti mic when the online classes was, you know, more of a thing, and she bought it hoping that it would work for recording the oboe. It's not the case. The partials on the oboe are a little bit too powerful. Even when you play quietly, it clips really easily.
Does it?
Yeah.
Is that just a USB mic?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. You do have to match the mic to the source, and it all, in the end though, it costs a lot of money to experiment and find the right stuff. So having someone like an EJ who can shortcut the process, and it can be like, okay, what's your budget? This is what you need to get.
Yeah.
And then, at least in my case, when he tells me, Garrett, you need to get this plug-in or you need to get this mic, I usually just say, okay.
Yeah.
Right?
You're the expert. I'm following your lead.
Yeah. And the quality of the stuff I'm putting out, I think, has greatly improved.
Yeah, totally. I've been listening to since it was Composer on Fire. I think when you had Jason Eckhart on was the first episode that I heard.
A long time ago. Yeah.
Yeah. And definitely like the quality of the podcast has skyrocketed undoubtedly.
I got to give most of that credit to EJ for coming in and polishing the turds I sometimes give him, you know. He makes it sound so much better. But he goes in and not just EQ and mastering, right? Making it ready to go, but he takes out breath sounds and the lip smacks, all the ums and ahs, so that when you're listening, it's highly polished.
The lip smack thing is something that when I started this podcast, I very briefly researched what are some things that people like listeners of podcasts don't want to hear. And lip smack was like at the top of that list.
Oh yeah.
So I when I put the audio into Reaper, I look for, you can find it very easily. It's like a very narrow, big spike in the sound wave.
One thing that drives me crazy as a listener is when they don't put a de-esser on the podcast. And if you have someone with a very sibilant voice, male or female, but in the really high register on their S's, it just pierces my eardrum. And it's an easy fix, right? Just put a de-esser plug-in on the thing. It'll help it a lot.
That's so true. It's really interesting. Like, it makes me think about when I was younger and I started doing landscaping.
Mm.
Whenever I would go by someone's yard and I would see that it wasn't cut, I would be like, they need to fix that.
Yeah, right.
You start to notice these things the more you are, starting some new hobby or whatever it is. Like, you start to see it everywhere.
Yes. Yeah. Even and I don't know if you've noticed this because you do a lot of audio editing for your podcast, right? You're listening to voices. But now when I'm watching a film, I can hear sometimes when they've moved from the live dialogue to ADR. You know what ADR is?
I don't know.
I can't remember what the letters stand for, but often when they're filming, the action on set is too loud. So they'll go into the studio and the actor will re-record the dialogue. And then the actor has the job of trying to sync up with their voice while they're watching themselves, right? But then the mixer has to match that audio to the ambient noises all around it. I mean, the skill level of a really well done movie is crazy. But if you're paying attention, you'll hear small changes in the quality of the audio or the timbre of the voice or the room sound will change for just a moment. And that's because they went in and punched in that phrase or that word or that whatever. And I'm starting to hear these things now, even while I'm watching movies.
That's funny. I know what you're talking about too, especially with movies that are either dubbed in a different language.
Yes. Yeah.
Or yeah, like you can hear it. What movie was? You ever see Major Payne with Damon Wayans?
Oh, maybe a long time ago.
Yeah, it's from the 90s. There's a bunch of scenes in that where it's so obvious that they overdid. They did voiceovers later on in post production. And you hear that and you're like, that's a little painful.
Yeah, they could have hired a better engineer and made it sound better.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's but you work with what you have for the most part. I mean,
oh yeah.
What is something with the mixing that you've been learning from I'm sorry, what's that? EJ?
EJ. Yep.
EJ, yeah. So where would you, how do I ask this? Like, where would you put yourself at this point with your understanding of mixing and like knowing what needs to be fixed or feeling confident in like, oh, this is a good mix versus like, oh, that crap that was from, yesterday or something?
Well, my first response is to say, I think I know enough to get it pretty good, but not great. And I also know enough to know that it's not great. And there's some extra thing that someone like EJ can do. I mean, these people, they spend more on their monitors than I've spent on my whole setup, right? Like they can hear these things that I literally can't hear. Part of it's my equipment and part of it is just, I haven't learned how to hear it. But I've grown a lot. Like the first thing that EJ taught me is that I'm not cutting enough frequencies. So talking about EQ, especially when I'm using virtual instruments and like film scores or the demos I make, I now go in and the first thing I do is a high pass filter and I get rid of everything below the bottom note of whatever instrument that is. Because all that stuff, even though you're not playing sound, there's a kind of a low level noise that's always present, or even some subharmonic frequencies that might resonate, and that builds up. And so my mixes were really muddy and it was hard to balance certain instruments properly. And as soon as I started to cut properly, all of a sudden things made more sense. And that's just the first step of many. But I hope I'm answering your question. I think I would never sell my services as a mixer. We'd say that. But I think I know what I'm doing more and more. and I'm always practicing. And then I always send the mixes to EJ, and he'll be like, "Oh, okay. Well, here, you want to add like, 6 decibels at whatever, 14K." And I'm like, "How do you hear? How?" And then it sounds better.
Yeah. That's exactly my thought about that too. I mean, like with my friends who do recording and mixing and stuff like that, and they'll be able to tweak it or hear things that I'm like, how did you know to do that, or that was an issue that needed to be resolved?
Yeah. Well, I think they've just learned to hear it. I have a book. Shoot, what is it? When I was teaching music technology, I got this book, and I wish I could remember the name of it right now, but it's like an ear training class for mix engineers. And so the accompanying audio will have, say, pink noise or something within a band. And the tests are, okay, can you identify which frequency range this is happening in?
Oh my God.
So you can train yourself to learn to hear the problem frequencies. And, I can, if something's feeding back, I can fix that. But I know generically how to make something more or less boxy, like the use of the mid-range, or to give something more power or clarity, like where to put that. But these guys like EJ, they can hear the whole mix, and they can pick out a specific instrument that can identify that problem, which I just don't have. But honestly, I don't know if I want to learn that skill. I have so many other things I want to do with my life. I am happy to have someone like EJ in my life who can do this, because he's way better than I will ever be. And I want to continue growing in the areas where I'm, investing my time. I like learning new things, but there's also a cost benefit analysis I've done where it's like I could put in the time to try to become as good as him. But then I would have to sacrifice some of these other things I'm working on, and I'm not sure I want to do that.
That's exactly a really good point, and transition into the whole idea of how much time you're spending on the things you need to be spending on, and prioritizing and stuff. Outsourcing, right?
Yeah.
Outsourcing the things that you might not need to really be worrying about or thinking about, and put that into the hands of a professional.
Yes.
Other than your own, time and effort.
Well, I think there's something to be said for knowing the basics, so that if you didn't have someone in the moment, you could get something done, right? But for the most part, when I outsource something, it's because I don't want to do it, or I can't do it. And the people I'm going to hire to do it can do it faster and cheaper. So if my time is worth X amount of dollars per hour, and I can hire someone at that rate or less to do what I need to do, that frees that hour up for me to be more productive in another way.
So you're comparing it against what you would typically charge for that amount of time.
That's one way to think about it. Yeah. It's like when I do my taxes, for the last 7 or 8 years, I've worked with an accountant, because it just got to the point once I started like forming LLCs and the businesses, and it just got so complicated, depreciation schedules and all that stuff, that yeah, I could sit down with TurboTax or something and I could figure it out, but it takes me hours. And I hate it. I mean, I just detest the process. So instead, I can pay this guy $400 to $500 every year to do it. It's done right. And if there is an issue, if the IRS decides to audit me, the person I'm with, they back me up, right? Like, that's part of it. Whereas if I did it by myself, then I'm up a creek. And so, yeah, that's a lot of money, but it's also a whole lot of stress I don't have to deal with. And we talked about how musicians have to have some like basic technology. You do. And I think musicians also need to know how to do their taxes, which I could do if I need to. But I want to do higher level things, right? Like I could do my taxes if I must, but I could serve more people and help others in more ways with the time that I'm saving by not doing my taxes.
Mm.
Does that make sense?
Oh, that makes total sense. Yeah. Yeah, totally. Yeah, you're able to allocate the time and energy to the places where it seems most fit for you and the people that you're working with or for, and then leaving everything else, like, outsourcing, right? Like putting it out to other people, like, okay, I got to take care of stuff over here. I'm writing this piece for this choir. It's going to be awesome. You can do my taxes.
Exactly. Otherwise, I'd have to say, all right, I'm not going to be able to get to that piece for another week or two, which I don't want to do, right?
Yeah, that'd be terrible. That's like completely compromising so much about your artistic expression and capabilities and identity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Trying to like fit everything into like, yeah, that's just spreading yourself too thin.
I think so. There's this struggle with being a real expert in a single domain, or kind of being a Jack or Jill of all trades, right? Being able to do all things. And I think there's value in both. But at the end of the day, I only have so many hours, right? And I have to choose how I'm going to spend that. And I want to move the needle in certain ways. And if I'm choosing activities that are going to take that away, then I don't feel good about the work I'm doing, and I'm not seeing the progress that I've committed myself to. And so when I do outsource, or when I work with others who can come alongside me and help me do what I'm doing better, I feel like it's a win. Not just for me, but these people are doing what they do too. In the same way I'm serving others, they're serving me, and I'm paying them for their time. And so I don't. It's like we're all helping each other in a way, but it's not like we're just like in a circle where we're just kind of passing the same money around. Instead, it goes out bigger, and I think it amplifies.
Right. There's a sort of ecosystem.
Absolutely, there is. I mean, like, okay, the greatest definition of capitalism is management of scarce resources, right? And you kind of gave the definition yourself, where you're looking at your time and your money, and you're saying, how am I going to manage this right? That's the heart of taking a scarce resource, time, money, whatever, your knowledge, and figuring out the best use for it at that time to maximize whatever it is you want to do. Whether that's making sure that you have time to compose the piece so you reach your deadline, or investing in a relationship like with your spouse. That time management is the same as financial management in that way. And that's kind of how capitalism works, and it creates this economy. And so when I'm making those decisions and I say, okay, well, I have decided that my time is worth so much, and I want to allocate my resources in such a way so that I can do this project. I'm going to pay that accountant to do my taxes. Then that creates a new economy. That person has his business, and he can serve other clients at the same time. And it filters out. It just doesn't come back in the circle or anything like that. It's way bigger than me. It's way bigger than me and him. It impacts our whole city ultimately, like the webs and the networks that we have and the way we serve and help each other. I hope that's making sense.
This is making so much sense. Yeah. I mean, it's so cool to hear you talk about that, because it sort of, not only are you putting money towards people who are, whether they're experts or just exceptional at what they do and can provide a really great product for you, you're allowing yourself the time and energy to pursue whatever you need to and want to. Like we were saying a moment ago, artistically, especially with composing, which is like such a at times rigorous process, you know,
Yeah.
and the creative energy, the mental energy of sitting alone in a room and like
Yeah.
trying to create this thing from nothing.
Well, from composing, like when you're really in it, when you're in the flow and you get through like a 3 hour composing session, at least for me, I can be mentally and emotionally just drained.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Have you experienced that? Because I put
Absolutely.
everything into this music. And if I had to turn around and apply that same level high thinking or the same amount of high level thinking, let's say it like that, into preparing my taxes, it's just not going to go well.
That sounds terrible.
Right? And so this is again a scarce resource. I have so much time, I have so much energy, and like that's why I also get up early in the morning to do my composing, because I'm freshest, I'm at the highest energy, and everyone else in the house is asleep, so I'm completely undisturbed.
It's so funny hearing you say this because this is exactly how I operate with composing. It has like if it doesn't happen first thing in the morning, it's harder for me to do it later in the day.
Yes, it is. Yep. And then I'm in my inbox, and I hate my inbox because it's just like I can't keep up, right? And then I've got to call so and so, I've got to go pick up the kid from school, the dog needs to go outside, and it just goes on and on and on. And it gets harder and harder to separate my mental and emotional energy into writing the music.
Oh, that's a really good way of putting it. Yeah, separating the emotional and mental energy.
Yeah.
That's exactly what it is. I've said this before on the podcast, but like for me, part of it is what you're saying is as the day goes on, it's like all these experiences that happen, like conversations with people, like seeing things on social media, on the news, having to pay a bill or something like that. And then all of a sudden it's like, okay, it's 6 o'clock at night. I didn't compose yet. Let me compose, you know,
And you're completely distracted, right?
completely distracted and so weighed down from all of that.
Yeah.
It's wow. That I haven't thought of it like that so much. That's such a concise way of putting it. The emotional, mental energy just
Oh,
being
well,
drained.
it kind of just came out. I wasn't planning that.
So this is kind of like this might be too general of a question, but was there a point where you started to where you realized you have to start scheduling your days in a specific way, and to kind of tack onto that, um, with composing, like did you always compose in the morning, or was that another thing where it's like, okay, I need to schedule my day in a certain way in order to best optimize my energy and all that stuff? Does that make sense?
I think so. I don't remember like making a decision. I've almost always been a morning person,
Mm.
so orienting my biggest creative moments towards the beginning of the day just felt natural. But as I grew professionally, and as the family grew and the kid got older, it also just made more sense for the reasons we've been discussing, and kind of settled into a really nice pattern that way. Because I want to give my best ability towards writing music, and I'm at my best first thing in the morning. And I know some people are best late at night. More power to you. And sometimes I stay up late at night and do stuff too, but I'm convinced that there's something like waking up and the mind is clear and free, and I'm not bogged down with the news, like you said, or whatever. Because honestly, the news just sucks, right? Sometimes, and I don't want that to cloud my ability to express whatever I want to express musically. So I'm not sure I'm really answering your question, or I'm giving you an answer you want, but for me, it just felt like the right choice, and I've kind of just continued to live into it. An ideal day for me, I usually get up like 4:45, and then I'll hit brew on the coffee pot, and then I do some meditation and reading and praying, and I try to read like a chapter a day or something of whatever book I'm reading. Usually something about economics or something, and then and and then I compose until the family gets up. So
Wow, 4:45 in the morning. Whew.
yeah,
Garrett, you are a champ, man.
that's what I do. But I also can. I have found that I can be okay on like 6 hours of sleep a night. Left my own devices, I'll sleep like 8 hours. But if I just do like 6 every night, I'm totally fine.
What is your usual bedtime? Like what time do you usually
Between 10 and 10:30.
10 and 10:30?
Yeah.
That's a good time. That seems like a really good time to yeah, because my own perspective is that like after 8 o'clock or 8:30, I'm like I don't need to be working, whatever that means too, like sending emails and stuff. I don't want to be working.
Yeah.
And part of it for me too, though, is like I have trouble sleeping. So if I continue doing stuff throughout the day, by the time I have to go to bed, I can't sleep because my mind is just,
Oh, really?
oh yeah, yeah.
I like that, Adam, and I try to implement it too, but I often fail.
Yeah.
I'm often like, oh, there's like just one more email or whatever. Something that's helped is during the pandemic, I picked up woodworking as a hobby.
Oh, I love that. I've been so interested in that for a long time.
And so I started making instruments. And like last summer, well, at the start of the pandemic, I said to my wife, I said, okay, we all need a pandemic hobby. What do you want to do? We're going to just we're going to spend some money. We're going to invest. And I'm going to make a Telecaster. And I had made some kit guitars and I loved it, but I wanted to make one from scratch. So I made a Telecaster from scratch, and now I'm making a P-bass. I have a neighbor who owns a mill, and he milled these beautiful figured walnut trees on his property in Iowa. And he gave me like $300 worth of beautiful black walnut. And I've been making crib boards and all this other stuff. Now I'm making this great P-bass out of it. And I just before I got on the call with you, I spent like 45 minutes sanding down an acoustic guitar. I'm building 2 acoustic guitars, one for my brother-in-law and one for me. And so at the end of the day, the way I can turn it off is like, I'm going to go and just make some sawdust. And that's what I say to my family. I'm going to make some sawdust, and you get kind of sweaty and dirty and tired.
Yeah.
But it's great, like the smell of the wood, and you're making something. And you said you did landscaping.
Yeah.
Like, I love that. I love yard work too, because you get to the end and you're like, do you see that? I did that, right? And even though I'm a composer and I love composing, a lot of that work is in my mind, and I can get to the end of the day. I'm like, well, here's 4 new bars, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't quite have that same thing, but when I'm building, especially with the wood, you can see the progress, and it's wonderful.
That's exactly it. I mean, there's a sort of tangible product at the end of it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Well, I have this weird enjoyment of shoveling snow. Like,
You too, huh?
yeah, like, and I think that's part of it is what, especially like, where I grew up in northwestern New Jersey, we got plenty of snow most winters, right? And on the winters where we would get like 2 feet or whatever it was, I loved shoveling out my car and just seeing like these tunnels around the side of my car with the snow piled up high above it. And like, it's like, look at that. Look at all this space I made.
Yeah. I love doing that too. I love putting on a podcast and just going outside and getting to work.
That's so funny. It's an interesting thing. Like, yeah, mowing lawns, and like even when you do just one strip and you look back and you can see all the high grass amongst this single strip that was cut, and you're like, oh, that looks so good.
Yeah.
I don't know. I guess it's just that like yeah, like I created this thing, I did that, and now it looks better, or it sounds better, or feels better.
Yeah. It's that, you said it, the tangible thing. And I love music, right? I've dedicated my whole career to it, but so much of it is not tangible.
Mm-hmm.
It's ephemeral. And that's part of what makes music so beautiful, because it's there and then it's not. And we can capture that with a recording, but the recording doesn't capture all of it, right? That's why a live performance is magical. And I kind of live for those moments. But when I'm home alone composing in my studio or just practicing my guitar, it's hard to get to the end of the day and say, I feel good with the work I did.
Yeah, I mean, because it's very like the majority of your time is spent doing something at home.
Yep.
Or let me rephrase that. The minority of your time is experiencing those moments with the music.
Yeah.
When you write a piece and then you have that ephemeral experience, right?
Right.
It's so infrequent that you need to have something to kind of maintain that life is good feeling, you know?
Well, at least I do. And I'm fortunate also to have a family and other like things. I think that's why we like having a community, friends you can go out with. Otherwise, if you just like a hermit, I'm not sure that's gonna help in the long run. But I had a teacher once say, you go to a baseball game, and a baseball game can be 3 to 4 hours long. For that one double play or the grand slam, right? And it's like 30 seconds of great action. But that's the whole game. You live for it. And some people will sit through an entire opera for the one aria that just grabs them. And that's what came to my mind when you said, we do this thing called music and we put all this time in for those few moments, the minority moments, how you said it.
Yeah. Wow. That's true about, especially with baseball games. Like they can be quite long, or like you said, like an opera.
Yeah.
Operas usually aren't, unless it's a micro opera, they're not like 20 minutes, or even less than that.
Well, especially if we take like the romantic operas that can be 3 to 4 hours long themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you know the composer Alan Belkin?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I just had him on the podcast, and we talked about the book Thinking Fast and Slow, I think it's called.
Oh yeah, Daniel Kahneman, right?
Yes.
A Nobel Prize for that, I think.
Yeah, and Alan was saying how it's so interesting. If you've seen Alan's work as an instructor, like he talks a lot about the experience of music and how to understand what features go into making a good piece of music. Like what's a good beginning? How do you effectively transition from one idea to the next? Continuity versus discontinuity and all that stuff. And he said he started thinking about this stuff more after reading that book and reading a specific section where the author talked about getting a colonoscopy. And he was saying that I think it was a study or something that people who got colonoscopies, they remembered the things that they remember the most about it was what did he say exactly? Oh, I'm going to say the wrong thing, and it's in the episode too. Something like the thing that stood out most to them is what they remembered the most. So like if it was an overwhelming feeling of discomfort, and it was only for a moment, that was what they remembered. And Alan heard that and he was like, like this you recognize this one moment that was a big deal, but it only lasted for a moment. That's like in music. There's like a climax, or like the way that the piece begins or ends, and we remember that thing.
Right. Out of the whole thing, we only remember this one.
Yeah, it's like you say Beethoven 5 and people think of that opening motive.
Yes.
That came to my mind when you were just talking about now I lost. I forgot what you were saying.
Go into the whole baseball game for the one double.
Yes, exactly.
It's the same idea, exactly. Yeah. That's real. I like how he phrased that. I came across Alan's work a long time ago because he's put a lot of his stuff out into the world for free.
For free?
Like when I was first teaching composition lessons, I didn't really know how to teach composition it's not, I've taught guitar lessons a gazillion times and piano lessons. That's easy. But to teach someone the creative side, I think is a little bit more challenging. So I leaned on the stuff he'd put out a lot. And he's just got these great resources on, like, how do you switch from one idea to the next? And then, like, basic orchestration treatise, too. Like, if you just want a good start. Yeah. That's cool you had him on the podcast.
Yeah, I was really excited about that. It was really cool. And everything you're saying, too, is exactly what sucked me in right away when I first started reading. I had this PDF a friend sent me called a practical guide to music composition.
Yes, that's
yeah,
it. Yep.
Yeah, and that's the one where he like talked all about, like, flow versus break, or whatever, or like momentum, balance, and all this stuff. Yeah. And I had never really heard anyone talk about it like that. And like what you're saying, that is a really effective way to teach composition.
I think so too. Yep.
Yeah, it's and like Alan and I had mentioned, and it's in his book and everything, is that it's completely style neutral.
Yeah, it really is, isn't it?
Because every piece of music, it's like you want to convey some sort of emotional experience, and there's certain mood and character you're setting, and it doesn't matter if it's pointillism or neo-romanticism or like microtonal textures or whatever. Like, a climax is a climax. How it's a moment where everything just comes to a big I can't even explain it right now, but it's where everything comes to a big moment. Everything just kind of, it's loud and whatever. That's a climax regardless of the style.
Yes. Yeah. He's really humble too. I've seen him on some of the Facebook groups that we're both members of, and he's just comes across as really genuine and wants to just help people.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the other thing that I think is really great too is he has such a what's the word, like, concise and comprehensible way of defining things about composition.
Yeah.
Like, what does balance mean? What is momentum? And like, he'll have like a little one sentence thing, and you're like, oh, that's exactly what it is. And like, and then you feel like you can compose the greatest piece ever after that.
Well, that's a mark of a good teacher, I would think, if he's empowering you in such a way where you're like, I can do this too.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, that's cool to hear, though, that you found his work and it resonated with you as well, and you applied it to teaching.
Oh yeah, 100%. My first academic job, I kind of felt like a fish out of water. Like, I was a composer. I can teach music theory. I can do whatever. But how do I guide someone who wants to compose into composing? And he just gave me a way to think about it. Gave me some language, balance, unity versus variety.
Yeah.
And I think younger composers struggle with transitions. Transitions are hard. And he gives us some simple ways to think about it.
Yeah, it's really cool. I really think that he's someone that more people should be aware of. I don't think that he's as, like, he has a pretty good following on YouTube. But I feel like his material should be taught in like composition classes and stuff, if it isn't.
Yeah, I don't know. He's a professor somewhere, right? I can't remember where.
Yeah, he's retired now, but he was at the University of Montreal.
Nice.
Yeah. Such a cool guy, really great, just way of making things comprehensible.
Yes, absolutely. Well, now people will go and get his stuff because they've listened to your interview with him.
I hope so, man. That would be great. That dude deserves it.
I agree. 100%.
Garrett, I have to ask you about the woodworking, man, because when you said that, I got really excited.
Yeah?
What has that been like?
Oh, well, besides what I've already described.
Yeah.
Satisfying. I also love, I'm making gifts for people. So it's been really rewarding for me to craft something. Like I will make compositions as gifts for people, and they appreciate it. But they can't hold it. They can't do anything with it. Like they'll play it or they'll listen to the recording or I could play it for them. But now I can give something to them and they can use it or whatever. So I mentioned cribbage boards. I do play cribbage.
I don't even know what that is.
Oh my gosh, it's like one of the best games ever. It's an old game. In fact, I'm a huge James Bond fan, believe it or not. I just love the guy. Love all the stories. And in the original stories by Ian Fleming, he's not playing poker in the casinos. He's playing cribbage. And he's betting. It was a huge casino game, but the cribbage boards, there you count points by moving pegs along these tracks. And so a cribbage board is often a beautiful piece of wood with so many holes. You have to get 121 points to win. So there's multiple ways to make it look, and whether you have 2, 3, or 4 or more tracks. But I'm taking these beautiful figured woods and I will inlay metal or mother of pearl or something into it, like an initial, and I'll laminate pieces together, and then I'll give those away as gifts. Or I've made these really cool. Hold on a second.
Oh, please.
So I made these, which are wine bottle holders, like a table centerpiece, and they self-balance. So it sits on the table like this, and then you put the neck of the wine bottle in, and it just balances. And it's so like I made this out of oak, and then I stained it, and and then I finished it in polyurethane, and then I just give it away as gifts. It's like, here, like for my neighbors, or whatever. And now I'm making instruments and it's just really satisfying.
That's really cool. I never even heard of a wine bottle holder like that.
Oh yeah. Should I go get a wine bottle? You want to see it in action?
I would love to see it in action, please.
Okay, I'm good. All right. I have to step away. All right. I'll be right back.
Yeah, I'll be right here. Don't worry. I never set a timer, although we don't have any strict time so much, but let's see.
Okay. Were you talking to me?
I'm just talking to myself out loud.
Okay, so I don't know if I can do this without it being on a table.
Yeah.
But it kind of just sits in here like this.
Oh my God.
Balances. I don't know. Can I do it on my hand? I can't. I don't know if I can keep my hand level enough. But it just self-balances and it looks really cool sitting on a table. But yeah, it's pretty cool. Things like this.
How do you, like, is there to find the center weight of gravity so it balances, is there like anything more you have to do or like to measure it or?
No, you just feel it. Like pull it in or out. Because some wine bottle necks are a little bit longer, right? So there's not like a method. You just feel it out. But I saw these. We went on a vacation up in the mountains of Colorado last year, and we walked into like a craft store, well, more like a artisanal store where a whole bunch of artisans were displaying their stuff. So there's pottery and visual art, and a woodworker had these, and I thought, oh well, I could make that. So I just came home and made it.
I love that.
And he was selling them for like $25 a pop.
Oh wow.
And this probably, I mean, it's like $7 worth of oak and polyurethane and stain, so it's like not expensive.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a nice like custom gift. So I mean, to get to your question, like the woodworking, I just find it deeply satisfying.
Yeah.
And learning all these new things, like how to inlay mother of pearl into wood, it has just been a real trip. And cold casting powdered metals, learning how to do that.
What is that? What is that exactly?
So it's a technique where you can buy they'll take a metal and they'll grind it up into a fine powder. So you can buy like aluminum powder or brass or copper or iron, depending on what color you want. And a lot of these will be used in chemistry experiments. So you often the suppliers are chemistry supply stores. Or, this is what they use in fireworks because each element burns at a different color and temperature. But what you do is you carve whatever pattern you want and you fill it with the powder, and then you can either use epoxy or super glue. And then you fill it, and that's called cold casting, and then you sand it down.
What does that do exactly? Like
So it creates an inlay inside the wood that's actually metal without having to, as opposed to a hot cast, which is where you have to make it molten, right? And so then you're not burning the wood. The other way to inlay it is to like have the metal already like as a sheet and then cut it out. And then you'd have to inlay that. So cold casting is the easiest way to get it into a particular shape without burning anything.
this is like inlays on a fingerboard of a guitar neck?
You could do that. So like this, I could fill this. This is just a trough, a circle I cut, and I could fill it with a powder and then cold cast it. Would you like to see an example?
Yeah, I don't want to, have you could do if you want to.
Sure.
I'm putting you to work today. You didn't know what this podcast was going to be like, Garrett.
I had no idea. So this is a Music Man style bass I made last Thanksgiving.
Wow.
But rather than the Music Man style pickup, or the cover, like the pick guard is usually this teardrop shaped thing. So I wanted to do this stained mahogany look, and I just cut where the pick guard would be, and I filled that with copper. And then I wanted this Irish Trinity circle. So that's aluminum and then iron. So what I did is I used hand carving chiseling tools to cut the pattern, and then I filled it with metal. And then I did it on the headstock too. That's my family symbol, because the ancient symbol for hope is an anchor. And I've taken that and I've tattooed it on my back, and I make wine. It's on my wine bottle labels. And and then rather than having a metal jack plate, I took another piece of mahogany and stained it to match. So
that looks amazing, Garrett. That is seriously so cool.
And then I inlaid this. It's mother of pearl with opal at the 12th fret.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Just geeking out on this stuff.
How long have you has this something that's always been an interest for you, and then when the pandemic came, you were like, oh, I'm going to do it now? Or was it just like you just sort of pointed and like, oh, I'll try that thing for the pandemic?
Yeah, it was more of that.
Wow.
Well, it was I don't know. I never did it before. Yeah. I didn't have any tools, nothing. My family has had, like, my grandfather was a wood carver and stuff, and I have some of his things around the house, but I never did it. And I was getting more and more interested in making my own guitars. So then I started with these kits. And I was like, well, what's the next step? Well, now I've got to do it myself. And then you buy tools, and then pretty soon you're into it for a couple grand. You're like, well, now I've got a table saw and a drill press and a scroll saw, but it's so rewarding.
This is so cool. Like, so for anyone who's watching or listens to this, when Garrett and I were emailing about what to talk about and stuff, one of his last emails to me was like, he's like, hey man, I'm looking forward to just talking about whatever comes up, like just, and this is one of those moments. What I love about this podcast is like these sort of things where I had no idea you even did any woodworking, and it's so cool to see.
Yeah, I wish I had a crib board to show you. They're just beautiful, but I gave them all away. Yeah. I'm making more as Christmas gifts right now. Hope no one's listening who might get one, but
if you're one of those people listening, you're getting a tie
You're
or
right.
or a nice hat. You are not getting a crib board.
That's right. Yeah. Well, next time you come to the lead lodge or lead center in Nebraska City for your retreat,
Mm.
I'll drive the hour down to you and I'll teach you how to play cribbage.
Are you in Kearney?
No, I'm in Lincoln.
Lincoln. Okay.
Yeah.
I see when I was in Nebraska City for the residency, I wanted to go around and explore and like go to Omaha, go, check out other places and stuff. That's the farthest west I've ever been. And
Real?
for real, yeah.
So you made it to the Missouri River. Congratulations.
Yeah. I'm slowly taking Lois and Clark's path.
That's right.
But and it was so crazy because I was there for I think 3 weeks.
That's a long time.
It's a long time. I never ever thought about you're in Nebraska. Anthony D'Onofrio is Anthony D'Onofrio, is that his last name?
He's in Kearney, right?
Yeah, I think he's in Kearney.
Yep.
Is also, yeah, he's in Kearney. And there's someone else who and it just I never thought about it. And then like the day after I got back, I put a post and you commented on it. And I was like, oh my God, Garrett.
You were only like an hour and a half away from Kansas City. Like, yes, there's a lot. Yeah.
Oh, man. Yeah. Have you been to the Kimmel Harding Nelson Center for the Arts at all?
In Nebraska City,
Mm-hmm.
I've been near it. So, like the Arbor Foundation is based there and stuff. So we've gone there a lot to do things there. And this time of year, they often have a big festival for the apple harvest because they have huge apple orchards, which it's all messed up because of COVID, right? These things, but. So I've been down in Nebraska City a lot, and they've got a great little golf course I love hitting up with friends.
Mm.
But while you were there, did you visit like the Underground Railroad house and all the Lewis and Clark stuff?
I did. Yeah.
Isn't that wild?
It was so fascinating.
Yeah.
When I went to check out the Lewis and Clark Museum and all that, and I walked around the trails and whatnot, and went down to the Missouri, the river. They had these giant modeled, whatever you want to call it, like tents from like Native Americans and stuff like that. And it was so cool because one of them was like this giant, like, I don't know what's called exactly, but it housed like maybe 20 or 30 people.
Okay.
And around the perimeter of it, it had like little stations. Like there was like a little sort of cage for any sort of livestock. And then there was another table to the side of that for like drying hide and like making leather or whatever it was. And then there was another section for like, I don't know, like their vegetables and all this other stuff. And it was just so fascinating to see how like this single tent functioned as like a condensed community,
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Did they have that there when you were there?
I think so. I actually haven't done the Lewis and Clark Museum in Nebraska City.
Okay.
But they came right through Nebraska. So there's all sorts of cool things. And the Oregon Trail is here too.
Mm-hmm.
And if you ever get to the other side of the state, like if you get to Scottsbluff, it's actually really cool because you're way out in the middle of nowhere, but there's these giant, the bluffs, right? They just kind of come out of the ground. And the way the geography works, there was really only one path the wagons could take, or else they'd have to go like days out of their way. And there are still ruts in the rock from the wagon wheels. And so you can like walk the trail, and they have wagons there to like, so you can kind of get a sense of what it was like. And there's a hill not too far away from Kearney. Well, it's closer to Lake McConaughey. I think it's called Winch Hill or something like that. But it was so steep, it was on the trail, that they actually had to winch the wagons down. And you just think like trying to get to Oregon from St. Louis, going 12 miles a day or something like that, and it'd be so hard.
Absolutely. I have enough trouble driving from Chicago to visit my mom in New Jersey. You know, like
Right.
that drive in my car that can go like 100 plus miles an hour, right? Like,
Yep.
and I get to sit there safe from the elements, you know?
Yeah. I love that stuff. I love history. And I was a history major in undergrad too. And living in places where that happens, I mean, on the East Coast, it's everywhere, right? And the further west you get, it's younger and younger
Mm-hmm.
in terms of American history or Western history. But I can't get enough of it. So every time we go someplace as a family, we'll stop and try to like absorb as much of it as we can. And yeah, and being in the Midwest is fascinating. A lot of people like it, they call them flyover states for a reason, but they could be wildly gorgeous. And part of what makes them beautiful is the wide openness of it. And I know people from the East Coast who that terrifies them, right? It, it manifests agoraphobia for them. It's too open. It's too expansive.
It's really funny that you're saying this because like it was almost like that for me. Because where I lived in New Jersey, like it's off the Appalachian Trail, so like it's pretty mountainous and hilly. The
Trees.
trees everywhere. The town I lived in, there's like really no flat roads. It's like curving, hilly, like, all over the place, right? When I moved to Bowling Green, Ohio, it was like I was like, "Where's the geography?"
Right?
There's like
Yeah.
it's just flat, straight, long fields or roads amongst fields, and
Yeah.
like the sun is always present. You know, there's no trees really to kind of go for shade or anything like that, and like, and at first it was like what you're saying. I was like, oh my god, this is not cool, you know. But then, but at the same time, I liked the fact that there was so much sky.
Yeah.
Like it was so interesting to be able to stand in one spot and then to be able to look really far that way and then 360 degrees around
Yeah.
and not have like a tree or like, you know, whatever sort of in the way, or if you're in a city like a skyscraper.
There are places where you can see the next town 12 miles away, right?
That's so amazing.
And I think Montana's catchphrase is the big sky country. And there's
Mm.
places where the sky feels so big.
Yeah.
And especially at night, like, when you were in Bowling Green or when you came out here and you go out into the middle of a field and it's just the Milky Way and you can't see anything else, just stars from horizon to horizon. It's overwhelming.
It is. It is. It's really powerful to have like you feel like the what's the word, like enormous magnitude of the world and like the universe in a way.
Yeah, it's something else. Yeah.
That's something. Have you heard or read the book Empire of the Summer Moon?
No.
It's you might appreciate this a lot actually because it's about the Comanche Indians in the Great Plains. And the book, I actually just read it very recently. The book is a historical document, but it's written like the dramatization of a novel. And the Comanche Indians were a Great Plains tribe.
Mm-hmm.
And they were one of the handful of tribes that mastered riding a horse because no other Indians, especially on the East, really rode horses.
Right.
Right. So like that whole thing that we see in movies like cowboys versus Indians, that whatever, like that was more of like a Great Plains Indian thing.
Yes, it was. Yeah.
And so the thing about the Comanches that is really, really amazing is that they were a warrior tribe. Like they were literally the Native American version of Spartans.
Hmm.
And they commanded the Texas and Oklahoma area for like 150 years.
Wow.
Because when the settlers came over, the French tried moving farther west. but the Comanche stopped them because they were so powerful, because they mastered riding a horse, and most other people would fight on foot.
Right.
And they were experts marksmen with their arrows, with bows and arrows. And they had these like 14-foot long lances that, like, you know, they're riding a horse and they got this lance, and they, you know, you have no chance, even if you have muskets and stuff. And so for 150 years, they stopped the French, they stopped Mexicans, they stopped, and then when the settlers started coming in, as the United States started to grow, no one could get past it, because, like what you were saying a moment ago, when people from the East Coast come into Middle America and stuff like that, like it's a lot for them. It's overwhelming. So when the settlers came to the Great Plains, they didn't know how to survive, because there was no timber. There, like rivers was harder to find.
Yep.
And the Comanche Indians, they that was their lifestyle, was living on the plains. So they lived off of the buffalo. And it's a fascinating read.
I'll have to read it. That sounds really good.
Yeah, it's a cool book. But one of the interesting things about it too is the last great Comanche chief. His name was Quanah Parker. He was half white, because his mother was captured in a raid, and she ended up marrying one of the chiefs, and then she birthed a few children, but Quanah Parker was one of them. He was the last great chief of the Comanche before they were forced onto a reservation, and he died in 1911.
Wow.
So going back to what you were saying before about how young the part of the country where you live in Nebraska and stuff is, like, you know, the last great chief of the Comanche was that, you know, he died only 110 years ago.
Yeah, that's not long.
It's not that long.
Yeah.
I mean, that was the premiere of Pierre Lunaire, or was that?
Yeah, it was 1912, but yeah,
1912?
Essentially the same. Yeah, like that's kind of bonkers, isn't it? And a lot of people don't realize how much space there is. Like, I just read a statistic, I think yesterday, that in America, we only occupy like 5% of all the land. And when you come to places like this, there are great swaths where there's nothing. That's why you can drive for hours and hours and you know, not hit much.
That's so interesting. Only 5% of the land of the United States of America.
I believe so. I hope that statistic's accurate. Someone's going to fact check me on it. But
that's fine. I say a lot of stuff on this podcast that's definitely wrong.
So I grew up in Denver, and my wife grew up in Central Alberta. She's Canadian. And it was a 16-hour drive for me to go see her when we were dating. And so I'd take I-25 north, all from Denver through Wyoming to Billings, Montana, and then cut across Montana to Alberta, and then up through Alberta. And it's all just prairie. And so, you know, it's like 8 hours from here to Billings, and I go through like 3 big towns. So there's stretches of the highway where they'll say, this is your last chance to fill up for like 60 some miles. Like, yeah. And some people who've never come this far west, they don't realize just how big the country is. There is so, and I'm not saying we need to fill it. Trust me. It's just that it's big. There's a lot of land. And then you read stories like that about the Comanche, who can command a territory that's bigger than most countries in the world, right? On horseback.
Oh my God.
How do you do that? Like, it's bigger than most of Europe, Texas is.
Yeah, that's true.
And you can command the whole territory without motorized vehicles.
Yeah, I know. It's amazing. I mean, that's so interesting to hear you say about the whole 60 miles until your next stop. I mean, I wonder, you know, people who have Teslas won't be in a good position then, probably, in an area like that.
Yeah, well, I think Tesla's trying to put those stations on all the interstates, but as long as you're filled up.
Yeah, that's true. There was this interesting part in that book too that was sort of like, cliffhanger in a way. But the author was talking about I don't know what group of Mexicans or whoever, but this group in Mexico was steadily pushing north into North America and like obliterating all these tribes along the way, right? Mm-hmm. And they finally get to like just about Texas, and the Apache Indians are there, and they're another horseback tribe that's also like warrior-esque. And the Mexican group was fighting with the Apaches for a while, and they were sort of at a standstill. And then one day the Apaches weren't attacking anymore. They couldn't, they weren't seeing them or anything. The Mexicans were like, what happened? Like, we had this intense battle. These guys are gone. And I don't know how much time went by between the last time they battled them and then saw the Apaches again. But the Apaches came to the Mexicans for a truce. And they're like, hey, man, we want a truce. We actually want to team with you because we're getting fucked up by the Comanches.
Huh.
And so that's what happened to the Apache, was that the Comanche, like, that was their territory. And they're like, you got to get out of here. And just started taking them out.
Wow.
It was a really intense moment to read about. I mean, obviously the author explains it and writes about it in a way that is way more exciting than I could, but
yeah, it's the history of history no matter what, I think is always fascinating and interesting. Mm-hmm. Have you spoken with Jared Tate yet for your podcast?
I haven't. I don't even know who Jared Tate is. Okay.
Well, he's an incredible composer, but he's part of the Chickasaw tribe in Oklahoma. Uh-huh. And so a lot of the music he writes pulls on that native music, and it's beautiful. He's doing really cool stuff. You should talk. This would be a fascinating conversation to have with Jared.
Oh, that's interesting. I'd love to talk to him.
Yeah. I'll connect you guys.
That's cool. Thank you.
Yeah, he's a really good guy and a great composer.
Was he in the Ultimate Music Business Summit?
He was. Yep. He gave a presentation about identity and like finding a place to stand in so that you can kind of make music that is your own.
I remember that. So I do know who he is.
Yep. Yeah, and he's been on the Portfolio Composer as well.
Okay.
He and I call each other just out of the blue every couple of weeks, just check in and talk. And
that's cool.
Yeah.
That's such a great relationship to have right there. I mean, like a buddy who you periodically kind of touch base with. And
well, that's one of the best things that's happened to me since starting the podcast. Like, I started the podcast because I wanted to pivot my skill set, right, from teaching towards helping other people in this new way. And it's given me incredible relationships with people that I genuinely can call friends, like Jared and others. And I now know people in just about every major city. I feel like I could go almost anywhere and there'd be someone I could go and get a meal with. It's been wonderful, and I hope you're having that experience too. Just building really true, meaningful relationships with people. It's been wonderful.
That's so cool to hear, and yeah, I'm definitely getting that as well. I mean, because that's the thing about this platform of doing a podcast is like you sit there with someone and you have this conversation with them. And it can, like yours, for example, like yours gets really in depth too. Like you ask really pointed and specific questions that like pierce through the heart of whatever issue it is you're trying to talk about, and that's one of the things I loved about it from the beginning. And I've learned so much from your podcast about like what you talk, like the business side of composing and, your being you as a small business owner. Mm-hmm. And but then also like you make it a point to you still have to compose though, like make sure you're being creative, you're putting time aside to allow your muse to like to work with your muse or whatever. And but the platform definitely, that's what's so great about it, is it allows that like organic, like, relationship building.
Yeah, at least it has for me.
Yeah, that's cool to hear. And I'm not surprised either, though, because like with your well, I mean, like I was saying, like you ask such pointed questions and stuff, but it's always so specific to who the guest is.
Which episodes really stood out to you?
Alex Shapiro, undoubtedly.
Oh, she is so amazing.
I mean, I actually just released I had her on the podcast. I just released the episode today.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. But her episode, because that was a 2-parter, right?
Yes.
That I remember that episode. I listened to it several times.
Can I tell you the story behind that one?
Please. I don't know the story.
So she lives on San Juan Island in the San Juan Archipelago, which is in the Salish Sea, which sits in between Seattle and Vancouver Island, just north of Puget Sound. Okay. And I have a really dear friend who was also a doctoral student at University of Nebraska while I was. She was getting hers in creative writing. And she's a poet, and I had been setting her works to music. And she had a visual artist friend who lives in Hamilton, Ontario. And we put together this incredible multidisciplinary presentation that was in an art gallery outside of Philly. And so she and her husband run a bed and breakfast on Orcas Island, which is just nearby where Alex was. And so we went and had a residency there. And the three of us just spent a week making art. It was glorious. But I knew I was going to be real close to Alex Shapiro. And here's this woman who is a killer composer. She's on the board of ASCAP. She writes about music business, all the things I'm thinking about. And so I just sent her this email out of the blue. I'm like, I know you don't know me, but I'm coming to your island. Can I interview you? Would you meet me? And she said, sure. Why don't I just pick you up and bring you back to my house? Like, are you kidding me? Like, you don't know me. But she does. So I take the ferry to her island, and we had actually just done this incredible hike on the island, just like see nature and the ocean and stuff. And she comes, we go back to her house, and her look, the whole house is a composing studio. It's amazing. And we sat on her couch drinking great scotch for like 3 hours. And I had bought these lavalier mics so that we could talk, because I have like a portable Zoom recorder, right? Like a device. And I thought, I want to get really good audio. And it turns out one of the cables was bad. So all that crackling was a bad cable, and I didn't know it. But like the conversation blew my mind. And those are my most downloaded episodes of all time, because they're so good.
I'm not surprised to hear that. That is like, yeah, it is so good.
So she is one of the most generous people too, to give me all that time, and people, she does that freely, and to help other people build their careers and become composers. And yeah. And so if you ever get to the San Juan Islands, send Alex an email. I'm not promising that she would do anything, but maybe you could buy her a coffee. I don't know.
that would, yeah, I would happily do that. That's such a cool story.
Yeah.
There's so much about that where like you cold emailed her, not knowing what that would be like, what the response would be. And then the generosity on her end of like, oh, let me pick you up. Let's cruise around the island. Let's spend these next 3 hours drinking scotch and just talking on your podcast.
Yeah. And now I've got her number on my phone, and I text her, like, not often, but I do. And she goes to the Midwest Clinic every December, like I do, to because it's a band conference, and that's our major compositional output. So like I get to hang out with her a little bit there, and she's wonderful. I'm so glad you got the chance to speak with her.
It's so cool to hear you say this. Yeah, me too. And everything you're saying is exactly what it was. Like we talked for 2.5 hours, and it never felt dull or there was any lulls in the conversation. And everything she said, I think even at one point I told her, I was like, Alex, you're dropping bombs. Like everything you're saying is like, you know.
Yeah. I told her at the end of our 3 hours, I was like, I think I'm in love with you.
It's not hard to be. It's not hard to be.
No. It's not hard at all.
One of the things too that I loved is she's so clever, but like that's not the word I want to say. Oh, I can't put it into words exactly, but like she has a way of talking about things that just puts it all into a digestible, like actionable format. Mm-hmm. Like I released some of the clips today, not clips, but like a little teaser for the episode. I always put teasers on Instagram. Oh, and nice. I try to find things that the guest says that are useful, funny, insightful, or like just a great story or something. And there was so much that she said that it's so hard to find like to break it down into clips that are short enough and to choose which ones should be used or should be omitted, you know?
Oh yeah. Especially with her, because like you said, she's just dropping bombs. And it's like, yeah. Which clip are you going to put out there? Exactly. She's succinct and she is eloquent. She speaks really well. Mm-hmm. And she does it with humor and grace. It never comes across as kind of thou must do this to be a composer. Instead, you listen to her and you feel like doors are opening and opportunities are coming your way. And she does it with a smile on her face, you know. And
that right there should be Alex's like slogan, like do it with a smile on your face.
Yeah. And she writes cool music too.
She does. I love it. I was telling her about the piece, I think it was called rock music.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
I think she had talked about that on your podcast. I don't remember, but I
think so, because I think that was a composers in schools and concert piece that she did. And I was at the same time was writing my first piece for them. And yeah, very innovative too. She was also one of the first composers to start integrating electronics into band music.
Really?
Yeah. And now a lot of people are doing it, but she was on the first wave of it.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, she is an innovator.
Absolutely, she is. Yep.
Are you going to the Midwest Clinic this year?
I'm planning on it.
Is that what it's called, Midwest Clinic?
Midwest Clinic. Yeah. I have my plane ticket purchased and my hotel reserved, but we'll see what happens, right?
Yeah, that's very true.
Holding their breath for conferences right now to see what's going to happen.
Yeah, it's a weird time, or it's been a weird time, but it's like getting weirder. I don't know.
Yeah, they canceled last year, right? And then they put it on. People are planning on it, but no one knows, right? Because the city of Chicago could shut it down, or maybe the risk level could just get too high to make it worth anyone's time. Or some people might just choose not to come because they don't feel safe yet, right? So normal attendance is between 17 and 19,000 people. Is everyone going to come who normally comes? No one knows yet what's going to happen.
That's very true. Yeah, especially something like that, being indoors, and yeah, like we don't know where this is going. Yes. How people are feeling.
And I don't want to get political. I really don't. Mm-hmm. But there's still questions about, are they going to have vaccine mandates? Like, are they going to require people to do that or not? That could come from the organization. It could come from the convention center. It could come from the city. Like, there's still so much up in the air too that's going to affect attendance and how well it goes. And
yeah, that's very true. Well, I want to throw this out there. If you do go, I would love to get a drink with you and Alex.
Well, I can't promise anything for Alex. We can ask.
Yeah.
You're on. We'll be there.
That would be cool because, I didn't know about the clinic. And or if I did, I just didn't realize it. But I looked into it very briefly, and I don't know if I'll be able to go or not, but I live in Chicago, so.
Well, I think it's worth going just to see. I mean, obviously, it's most valuable if that's your market, educational music, and specifically bands and orchestras. If that's not who you write for, you're not going to get a whole lot of benefit out of it. But it's still good to look at it and see how are other composers presenting themselves to the marketplace. What does it look like to network in these kinds of situations? And then the performing groups. In a normal year, it's mind-blowing. There are these middle school groups, so like these 7th graders who come and they sound like college bands. Like, how is this possible? But it happens every year. And then there's the high school groups and the college bands, and they just all sound incredible.
Oh, whoever's teaching these kids, or whoever their director is they're doing something very right.
Well, this might be a kind of a controversial statement, but that's up for debate.
Mm-hmm.
So, some states like Texas have really invested in their band programs. Like, band is a huge thing. And so a lot of these high performing groups come from states like Texas, where they've been pushing instrumental education. Now, I think there's value in that, right? But where is the line where you push too hard? So, okay, we can get these 7th and 8th graders to play grade 4, grade 5 stuff at a high level. But do they need to?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Right? What are we sacrificing in order to get them there? And what's the burnout rate? How many of those kids are staying with music for the rest of their lives because they just love it, right? Or by the time they graduate high school, they're just like, I'm so sick of it, I'm done. I don't know the answer, but there's always some sort of trade-off here. And another composer friend, Mark Connor, who has a podcast, Everything Band, and he's talking to band directors. One question he asks a lot is, what's your feeling on competitions? And this is something that happens in the band world. Did you grow up as you play saxophone, right?
I played saxophone very briefly in middle school.
Okay,
but
well,
it's funny that you remember that. Good memory.
Well, I try. I'm glad I got that right. So there's festivals and competitions where bands go to get judged, and then especially in marching band, like it's a thing. But what's the value, and what are we judging on? Are we helping kids grow musically, or are we just playing towards the contest? And so these are discussions that are actually kind of hot button issues, and there are camps of people who firmly believe like this is the way it should be, and then the opposite. And in Nebraska, I talked to band directors, and the marching band world here is completely divided. Like, there's every school needs to have a band, and everyone's going to compete. But in our state, we have 2 or 3 urban areas that can support high schools that have marching bands, and then so many rural schools that you're lucky if you can get 12 kids together for your whole band. How are they going to compete? And yet the system kind of forces them to.
So all these schools are going into the same competitions.
Yeah, I mean, they level it, right? So like your big high schools will only compete against big high schools and stuff. But
right.
if you are from the Sandhills and your school district pulls kids from like 60 square miles together, as opposed to a school district which is like 4 square miles all by itself, and you've got 2,000 kids in your high school, and then you have a 200-person marching band, and then you bring your 12 kids into the competition, it's a hard thing, right? Because there's value in competition, there's value in pushing yourself to play to a high level, but is there something negative happening too? And those are the questions that like Mark Connor is always asking and trying to explore. And then you see these kids at the Midwest Clinic that are just blow your socks off. They're so good. But I also I want these kids to just love music because music's amazing. And lifelong music lovers, maybe they all become composers. I don't know. But isn't the goal to have everyone fall in love with music for its own sake and be able to play music for the rest of their lives and enjoy it? And I have friends who their parents pushed them really hard, or they had a bad band director or something, and they haven't played for years, or they hate it. Do you have friends like that?
Oh yeah, totally.
Yeah, so that's where music education somehow failed them. Instead of instilling this lifelong passion or this skill where they could always pick up an instrument and participate, make music with your friends in your church or just, in your backyard.
That's something sorry, no, please continue.
No, I was finishing my thought. I was emphasizing my point. That's all.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, though, that's something right there that I know you talk about quite a bit on your podcast, is like how much you can take from your experience as a musician and apply it to other areas of your life. Yeah. And so I can only imagine, to your point about these kids sort of being pushed and overworked in certain ways and whatnot, that opportunity is then taken away from them. The ability to be able to take the skill set of discipline and receiving critique openly, and not focusing so much on the goal, more on the process, missing out on that. Obviously, you don't only have to learn about that through music, but it is something that you do learn it from.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. And, music's a weird thing because you either play it correctly or you don't. Right? You get the notes right and the rhythms right and you're in tune, or you're not. But at the same time, if we make that the ultimate objective for these young students who are developing, instead of learning how to listen across the band, and can you hear all the contrapuntal points or whatever, immersing yourself into the whole world instead of fixating on these details. And a lot of the competitions, you look at the forums, it's articulations. Yeah, they got them all right. Okay, were they in tune? Yeah, they got it right. Instead of, was it an enjoyable musical experience? So there's a balancing act. I don't have answers. My whole point was, even though these kids are performing at a high level, that doesn't necessarily mean that that's what we should be doing with young players.
Totally. Yeah. Point well made. It's something where I noticed, and my only experiences with one-on-one lessons, teaching guitar and whatnot. But I've noticed with some of the kids who I teach that are younger than middle school and stuff, it's they have busier schedules than I do. And
oh yeah.
And I'm I don't know. I'm not a parent. I'm not going to tell people how to parent. I don't think that's a good idea though. So I guess I am telling people how to parent. I don't know.
It's really, really hard. You want your kid to be involved and to be in extracurriculars, but pretty soon every single night of the week is taken up with something, and then they have homework on top of that. And
yeah, there's a book I read called The Coddling of the American Mind by Jonathan Haidt.
Yep.
Yeah, and he talks about in that book how one of the things that a lot of children are missing out on today, or at least the last 20 years, is free play.
Yes.
Separate from adult supervision.
Mm-hmm.
And he talks a lot about how we learn a lot and gains social interactive skill sets in those small moments we have as children, that when we have to decide, if you're playing kickball or something and you're choosing teams, and then a little scuffle breaks out, you then learned a very valuable lesson about how do you respond when someone does something that you don't like or something, or vice versa. Mm-hmm. Whereas if there's adult supervision, the adult would intervene.
Yes.
And then now that kid then has to rely on an authority figure to be oh, this is bad, that can't happen anymore.
Yes, I agree completely with Height's premise on that. I used to teach at a college in Pennsylvania, and there was a researcher there who wrote a book about child development. I can't remember the name of the book, but it was really influential to my wife and I because our daughter was very young when we read it, when we first met her. But the value of the free play, but also dangerous play,
Mm.
like letting that kid climb the tree
Mm.
or scramble up that boulder, right? Like there, not only is it a skill set that can lead to other things, or learning how to negotiate in a social situation like you just described, but every person has to find that line of where they're capable.
Mm.
And part of, I think, the role of a parent is to let the child find that. You want them to be safe, but if they never learn what they're capable of, like how high can they climb in the tree before it's too high? Or can they walk on that edge that's like 6 feet off the ground? If they fall, they're probably going to get hurt, but they're not going to die. They're just going to get hurt. But you have to do that. And what Haidt is saying is we've taken away all that danger, right? Playgrounds are now safe with rubber mats. When I was a kid, like sometimes they were just on concrete, or the slides were metal and you get burnt when you go down in the middle of the summer. And, whatever, like we'd shoot each other with BB guns, for heaven's sake.
Yeah.
It wasn't always safe.
Mm-hmm.
And there's lots of research to show that that's really, really important. And maybe we can apply that to music too. Are we too safe now? Are we all trying to just follow the rules? I don't know. I don't know.
Mm.
But you're right. Like you're in your studio, you get these kids that have something every night, and they're not just outside playing. And when they have time off, what do they want to do? Well, they don't. They want to just like be on social media or playing games. It's fine. I played video games too. But like my daughter right now is in high school, and she tells me that they go into the cafeteria, and these kids who don't have social groups, rather than sitting with friends, they just sit and they just have their phone on their face. So they're not even learning how to small talk. Right?
Yeah, that's like all of the socialization that they're getting is through their device.
Yeah.
Even in social situations.
Right. And I find myself too, like I'm in some public place, and I might be waiting for someone, and it's just so easy to pull out your phone. So one thing I'm trying right now is like, I'm just gonna just stand here. I'm just gonna watch people. Maybe I'll start up a conversation with somebody. And that's actually really hard. But I grew up having to do that. That was normal, right? But now it's not normal. But people like my daughter's age, they don't even know how to do that because they've always had something.
That's true. Yeah. I remember, going to friends' houses to see if they were home,
Yes.
And it was always fun too, though.
Call somebody.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, when I was younger, I used to skateboard, and my friends and I, before we had license, whatever, you'd have to like go to their house and knock on their door, and their parents like, oh, they're actually in town. So then you'd skate into town and try to find them, like.
Yes, right. You don't know where they are.
Yeah.
And that's a dangerous sport too, right?
Oh my God. Yeah. It can be quite dangerous. It's funny though, because I played soccer most of my life all the way until senior year in high school, and I got worse injuries in soccer than from skateboarding.
Did you really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I messed my ankles up a lot, and I was in crutches a bunch. I had several walking casts, and like.
Here you are.
Yeah, I'm still moving. I mean, now from skating, I have like 5 scars in this exact spot from falling,
Wow.
It was just like scar on top of scar.
That's so cool. I remember once we built a little ramp, and I always wanted to be a skateboarder, but I was terrible. But I took it with my bike, and for some reason I locked my front brake right before I landed. ended up flipping over the handlebars and breaking a tooth in half.
Oh my
Like, how many kids get that kind of experience, right?
God. That's yeah.
Or and these, these kind of injuries. I remember my friend's brother trying to jump over a rock, and said he landed on the rock and he skinned his kneecap down to the bone.
Oh my
And you could
God.
see it, and so like you just, those are the things that for me make up a lot of the childhood experiences where you learn like, oh, maybe I shouldn't actually do that.
Mhm.
And now as an adult, I know exactly where that line is. But you also keep pushing until you can do it. I don't know. I don't know what I'm saying anymore. But there, we have to let people have the ability and the freedom to have the unsupervised playtime and take dangerous choices.
It's a tough area. I think I'm like I said, I'm not a parent or anything like that. Um, what has that been like for you with your daughter? Have you like I know that like when I'm a father, I'm gonna be like so nervous about her like just walking out the door, you know?
I'm more nervous about other people than I am about her.
Okay.
But she's always been precocious, and we've encouraged her to be precocious and explore and make bold decisions, and climb. She loves climbing. I mean, she always has. And the time she broke her arm is because she fell out of a tree. But like, that's okay for me. Well, did that stop her from climbing trees? Absolutely not. But she's climbing trees better now, right? Just like you probably don't fall on your elbow as much anymore after those 5 falls.
Oh man. Yeah. I have learned how to fall better, if that makes sense. But that's it's funny, like because in Jonathan Haidt's book, he says a similar scenario about this. Have you read that book before? Or?
I've read excerpts, but I've listened to a lot of interviews with him, and I've read
Righteous Mind.
no, a lot of Steven Pinker's stuff and
Okay.
Jordan Peterson's stuff, where they're all kind of within a camp saying these similar.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. But there was a park that Jonathan Haidt was talking about in New York City that is it's a park for kids that I don't think has adult supervision. Not only that, there's like hammers, nails, saws for the kids to use. And the parents have to sign waivers to be like, my kid can roam free and I will not sue, sort of thing.
Right.
And he said when he first went to that park to see, to check it out and whatnot, he saw a kid with a hammer and a nail and he was just banging along. And then the kid smacked his thumb. He was like an 8-year-old kid. And the kid like, goddamn. Well, he probably didn't say goddamn, but he might have. But he like hurt his finger. And then he like paused for a moment, shook his finger off, and then started hammering again. Hit his finger again. And then, went through a little bit of pain and then started hammering again. And Jonathan Haidt like ended that chapter beautifully. And he said something like, the kid wasn't learning about what's dangerous. He was learning how to hammer.
Yes. So my wife is a Montessori teacher. And part of the Montessori education philosophy is to let kids experience real things and to make their own choices. And we put our daughter through that. So even when she was 18 months old, all of the things they manipulated in their classroom were real, nothing plastic. So if they dropped their glass cup, it broke.
Wow.
They had to participate in the food preparation, like the slicing of the cheese or the fruit for their snack. And so they used sharp knives. And so these little kids, are they going to nick a finger? Absolutely. But then do they learn how to use that tool in the proper way? 100%. And a lot of like Montessori schools will create similar outdoor environments where it's like a natural play place, not an artificial playground like most traditional educations. So the school here where my wife teaches and our daughter went is on 10 acres. It's a semi-working farm, and they used to have animals. So the kids had to feed the chickens. They had to brush the horses. They have to, do this work, but then there's forests. So in their free time, what do? They're playing in a forest, climbing trees and hide and seek and whatever. And that's where my daughter broke her arm, was at school. And that's okay. Like, that's fine. Like, there's also wild animals. Just a couple weeks ago, a muskrat bit a kid. Like, how can you plan for that?
Yeah. Well, I just have to say real quick about muskrats is they're pricks.
Oh, they're terrible.
They're little pricks. I don't like those things.
I don't either.
That's really, really interesting. I don't know anything about Montessori schools, honestly. I had never really heard of them until I started dating my girlfriend, because she went to one.
Oh, did she?
Yeah. I think only for like a year or so. But that's it. Are they all like that?
Not exactly. And there's different camps within Montessori, but the overwhelming philosophy is child-centered learning. So the child often chooses what they're going to do, and then they're allowed to stay on that focus as long as they need. So for instance, if you have a really young kid, a lot of that work for like these 18-year-olds might be like slicing the cheese. And if that kid needs to do that for an hour, you let them do that. Mm-hmm. Because what they're doing is they're practicing the skill. Or pouring, like, let's put water in this ceramic dish and let's fill these cups. And sometimes that kid just wants to practice pouring, right? Mm-hmm. Let them do it until they're done. And they learn the skill. They also learn like what's fragile, what's not. And oftentimes when we're working with the kids, we get impatient. Mm. And this happens in a lot of traditional schooling. It's like, okay, well, we're doing this activity until this time, and then you're going to stop what you're doing and we're going to switch activities, whether the kid's ready to or not. And I think we can equate some of that to music education too. Like you and I both taught a gazillion guitar lessons, right? And sometimes it's really easy to just say, this is the way you're going to hold your instrument. This is the way you strum it. This is the way you're going to learn the song. And then you and I will talk to these composers and they'll say, but I had a teacher who let me make up my own stuff. And that's why I'm doing what I do. And unless you have that teacher who allows them to stay in that moment for a while and explore and maybe cross those lines of like, this is the way it's supposed to be, then we're just creating rule followers, not innovators.
Oh, that's really interesting. That's, yeah. That's tricky as an instructor.
Yeah, right? Especially if this kid says, well, I want to learn how to play this song, or you have a curriculum, you're working through a book. But I don't, it's really hard. Like, how do you give them that freedom and the structure at the same time?
Yeah, exactly. That's my exact thought. Like hearing you say that and thinking back to the lessons that I teach, it's weird. It's really weird to try to kind of like, maintain that structure and then allow them to explore and stuff like that, and have the freedom of like, well, let's just see like what you've learned so far. Try to play something, make something up, right? Or just put them on the spot, right? Like,
yeah. Or compose a different ending to this.
Yeah.
Or something.
Yeah. That's one thing that I realized when I teach is there's like, when a student starts to do something that's like what I deem as abnormal, I'll correct them on that. And I'll be like, well, wait a second. That's not always the case, you know? And I try to be like, what's the word? Provide options, I guess you can say. And it's so challenging. It's so challenging to be like if they say, well, why do I have to hold the pick like that? And it's like, well, this is the pointy end. That's one aspect, you know. The other one is like everyone holds picks like this, but at the same time, that doesn't necessarily mean you can't hold it, you know, any other way.
Yes.
And one of the things that could be troubling is like in teaching, allowing, let's say the example is allowing the kid to hold the pick abnormally. and then continuing to try to teach them in a way that requires them to hold it normally. That's one of the things that I've run into when I try to be much more open about what the student wants to do. I'm like, all right, do that. And then like instances will come up where I'm like, all right, this is where holding the pick the proper way would be beneficial.
Right. Know? So I think we can differentiate maybe between technique issues and creativity issues. So how many times have you had students play with the flats of their fingers and they're muting strings accidentally, or they're not getting a good sound, and you're like, no, you have to play with your fingertips, right? So like that's a technique issue. But when it comes to like learning, like maybe they're learning how to fret in a new way, like or a different position, or maybe like they're coming up with a new ending or introduction to a song. That's where I think we can give them freedom. But sometimes bad technique can lead to injury, or like you're going to drop your pick, man. Like you don't want to do that, or you're going to just it's just going to sound bad. So like you could say, sure, go ahead, but I would bet that these three things might happen. One of these three things. But if you want to explore something that's not a technique issue, then maybe we could, give them some more of that freedom.
That's a good point. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, allowing them to sort of explore that and work on that creative muscle, which is like a problem-solving sort of thing.
Right. Yeah. And you've listened to the podcast enough, I'm a Seth Godin fan. And when he talks about education, he says one of the problems right now is we've been teaching students how to get the right answer. And that's the wrong way to do it. We want people who can ask the right questions. So what does that mean for music, Adam? Right? So we graduate how many thousands of people across the nation every year who can play the same excerpts at the same level, the right way. They get the right notes in the right rhythm, in tune. Okay. So do we need to do something new? Like, do we need another recording of this piece when like there's 18 on Naxos or something that are all equally good, unless you're going to do something crazy with it, some new interpretation? So music's a weird thing where you like, yeah, that's how it's written, but well, how do we move beyond that in education and letting people explore and grow? And what does that mean then if we're all just the same thing and everything's fungible? Like if I can't play any different way, then I'm instantly replaceable by anyone else. That's
definitely one of the biggest and most challenging questions, I think, right now in classical music.
Oh, yeah. And this is part of the reason, well, a lot of the work I'm doing, the stuff I'm building, and the Ultimate Music Business Summit and stuff, is because this is where I think schools kind of drop the ball. Now, I don't want to throw schools completely under the bus, because, I mean, the school's job, I think, is to help people play at the highest level possible. That's the promise they're offering, right? But then they also offer a promise of like employment on the other end. And that's where I think it falls off the rails, because that's not always there anymore. And so we're going to give them these skill sets, but we're not preparing them on what to do with the skill set afterwards.
Right. Yeah. And that's literally where your podcast comes in.
Exactly. Yep. And it's like, okay, great. You went to school to learn how to write music. Like you need to do that. I needed to do that. That's important. But when the school comes along and then says, well, there's academic jobs down the line, but there's not, right? Or there's the orchestral gig, you can get it. Yeah, but when we're all competing against 500 other people that are as good or maybe even better, I think we're doing a disservice to the music community at large. And the people who are doing the most interesting work are the ones who are willing to explore the edges and outside the edges in performance, in writing. And I'm not just saying the avant-garde. Like, I don't like, that's fine, whatever. I'm talking more about interpretation kind of issues too. Like, you don't just have to play it so strictly all the time. I don't feel like I'm saying it well, Adam. I'm not conveying my idea with clarity.
No, you really are, honestly. And as you can see from talking to me, like, I have such a hard time being clear about what I'm trying to say. No, one of the things that comes to mind about this whole idea of presenting a different interpretation and stuff is when, I can't remember what concerto it was, but when Glenn Gould was performing, I think it might have been Brahms or something, some piano concerto that I don't even know. And Leonard Bernstein was conducting. And there was like a very, very large interpretation issue, or a gap, I should say, between what the soloist Glenn Gould wanted and the conductor Leonard Bernstein wanted. And there's a video, or you can probably see the whole performance too, where at the very beginning of the performance, Leonard Bernstein came out and like gave a disclaimer to the audience. He's like, what you're about to see is unconventional. This is not what I would have chosen, but this is what's great about art, is because every artist has their own way of thinking and wanting to do things. And that's what makes me interested in doing this, you know? And so it was cool to hear him say that. He's like, I don't agree with what Glenn wants, but I like that he wants to do this, or like, I respect and appreciate it, and I'm going to follow through with it. And so like one of the things I think that was so drastic about it was Glenn Gould played like drastically slower or something like that. Even just that alone, like, you know, what if Beethoven's Fifth Symphony was like, ba, da, 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 you know?
Right? It'd be painful.
It'd be a very different experience.
But that's the bolder choice, right?
Mm-hmm.
For him to take as a conductor, to say, okay, this is not what I'm going to do, what I wanted to do, but it's something new.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And I think composers have done a disservice when we say there's a way to do it. And I think Stockhausen was one of the worst. There are stories of him, you know, sitting with a scowl on his face watching a performer, and he's like, you played that, you know, nested tuplet wrong. Like, I'm not a computer, man. and I think what gets me really excited is just that people are interpreting my music. Mm-hmm. And I don't get hung up too much on, like, does it sound exactly the way the first performance sounded? No, not at all. Like, I want directors and performers to put their own life into the music I'm writing. I don't want it to sound the same way every time. And when composers say, like, this is the way it's got to be, I think that's a problem.
Oh, performers listening, go to Garrett, commission Garrett.
Yes, please.
Yeah, I'm very with you on that, on the you know, the specificity of what you write versus how the performer performs it. Like, whenever I write a piece, I have to work very closely with performers, because the music I write, it can't be interpreted in Sibelius. You know, there's like all kinds of sounds and shit, and like, you know, bow like this so that you only hear the bow rubbing against the string but not the note. I can't recreate that in Sibelius, so I have to work with the performer a lot. And when they're playing the excerpt, or like I hear the first rehearsal, the piece all the way through, and they're like, oh, I'm not getting this rhythm right. I'm like, no, that's fine. You're getting the idea across, and the mood and character is exactly what I want it to be.
Yes.
You know? And that's the most important thing for me as a composer, is like, as long as it expresses the character, then yeah. And the emotion that I want to elicit, mm-hmm. as long as that's there, that's really the most important thing for me.
Yeah, me too. Yep.
Yeah.
I just get super excited when people play my music too.
Oh my God. Isn't it the coolest feeling? Like, especially when you hear it for the first time.
Oh yes. Sometimes I even fail to listen critically. Like the performer's so nervous and they want your feedback, and I'm just like this grin on my face saying, "You're playing my music. Oh my gosh."
Yeah, exactly. You're here, you're experiencing it for the first time. It's like, I mean, it's like you just birthed a child and you saw it, like, oh my God, there it is. That's been, growing for 9 months and now it's here.
Yeah.
Like it's yeah, you're so, oh man. So here's that moment where I'm having a hard time being clear about what I want to say. It's overwhelming. It's overwhelming.
Yeah. But it's wonderful. That's why we do it, right? For those ephemeral moments.
There it is right there, Garrett. We just came full circle.
I sure did.
I feel that is actually probably a good way to round things off with the conversation. What do you think?
I think that's a good place to be.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Awesome. It's amazing. Like, I don't think we talked too much about a lot of the stuff we had corresponded about, but I'm not upset about that.
It was, yeah, no, it's fine. It was a really interesting conversation. I hope that it was what you wanted.
Oh no, absolutely. Well, I do want to, let's touch on one thing though before we sign off here.
Okay.
The Ultimate Music Business Summit.
Oh yeah. Glad you remembered that.
I did. I did not want to forget that. Before you say anything, I want to say I got to do the first one this past January, right? It was in January.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it was such a cool opportunity and experience. It's like, to give a very brief overview to people before you explain it, is that you get all these speakers who do these presentations. This past year was online. And I don't know if it'll be similar. Garrett will talk about that, but and they talk for, I don't know, about an hour or so about something specific. And so, like, for example, Sarah Whitney was on and she talked about overwhelm and imposter syndrome. And seeing her on your thing, I immediately was like, oh my God, I contacted her and asked her to be on the podcast, right? Heidi K. Begay talked about podcasting, how to start a podcast, and then I can't remember his name. He plays the double bass, Jason something.
Jason Heath.
Jason Heath talked about starting a YouTube channel and, like, understanding your analytics and all that stuff on YouTube. All things that are so practical for the current modern living musician. That's my testimonial right there for Ultimate Music Business Summit.
Can we use that?
By all means, go right ahead.
Sweet. I will. Yeah. So it's going to happen online again, and it's actually going to be early January. So last year, in the middle of the pandemic, I was aware of all the people who really didn't know what to do. People were stuck. People were afraid. And around Thanksgiving, I just said, I got to build something. And I had this idea of doing the summit. And I built the whole thing in like 4 weeks. And I did it all myself. It was just insane. Because I had to build the website and get all the videos and contact everyone. And now I've got an executive team. So Arthur Brewer, who's a composer and web designer, and Heidi K. Begay, who you mentioned. Together, we are building this. And we've been working on it for months already. And we already have almost 30 presenters. And it's going to be the first weekend in January. I think that's 6, 7, 8 or something like that. And again, it will be online. And there will be a couple ticket options based on price, but it'll be like a conference. And last year, the videos were pre-recorded. This time, almost all of them are going to be live. And we're hoping that there will be a Q&A element at the end. So if you want to know more. But the whole point is to help people take control of their business. And part of my philosophy is that if you're operating as a musician, you are a small business owner, and you got to know what that means. And so all of these presentations are actionable, and meaning that you can listen to it and you can walk away and there's at least one thing you can do that'll help move the needle for you, which in the end should mean more money, right? So that you can do what you're doing better, and you can keep a roof over your head and food in the fridge and maintain your instrument or whatever it is you need to do, from mindset to copyright issues to I'm going to be talking about finding opportunities, new income streams, podcasting, web design, hosting, all of that stuff. So all these presentations are like little micro lessons on one facet of being a small business owner, an independent gigging musician today. And we're trying to make it for everyone, not just composers, not just performers, but widely applicable. And there will be, like I said, a really low cost option. Last year was the free option, but I think we're probably going to use it on a platform that has a minimum fee just to cover the cost. So we're talking just a few dollars. And then like a all access pass like we did last year too, which would allow you to have access to all the videos forever. So you don't actually have to show up on the time and date of the presentation. But it's going to be amazing, the lineup we have already. And we have a keynote speaker this year.
Am I allowed to ask who the keynote is?
Sure. His name is Drew X. Coles, and he's a professor at a number of places in New York City. I mean, the guy is phenomenal. He teaches about music entrepreneurship and business, but he walks the talk. This guy, he and his wife have built this incredible, they do mostly, to my understanding, wedding band, wedding music kind of stuff. Mm. But I mean, they're grossing like 6 to 7 figures a year in New York City. And so he teaches music business. He's doing it. I mean, it's going to be phenomenal. It's going to be a really cool event. So that's musicsummit.biz. I encourage people to go. You can see the list of presenters that we've already got. You can read about Drew Coles, and you can get your name on the list. And if you do that, then we'll be able to let you know right away when tickets go on sale, which is going to be soon. We're solving some problems on the back end right now. By the time this podcast launches, it should be all ready to go. But
well, I will definitely be in attendance.
Thank you.
Is it going to be a similar format last year, where it was sort of like an all day thing? Like, because there was like a few hour break in the middle there around noon, right?
Yeah, we're not totally sure. Either it'll be like one presentation at a time over a couple days, but we have so many amazing presentations. We might treat it more like a live conference where there'll be like 2 things happening at once.
Okay.
And like I said, these will be live presentations. So you can go and you can watch someone, and then you can ask Q&A and participate, just like if you were in a real conference. And yeah, it's going to be phenomenal. And we want this to be helpful. So we're trying to keep the costs low, but also you're going to get, if you get that all access pass, like 25, 30 hours possibly of content. So it's like the investment on what you can get for the investment will be huge. If you apply just a few of the concepts, it should really help you take control, like serve your audience better, make more money, and make a difference to your community, whatever that means, whatever your goal is. There's going to be someone that's going to help you do that.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's entirely what I got from it last year, and very excited that you're doing it again. And like you had mentioned, I mean, it's definitely for more than just composers.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I could think specifically that Scott Teague, the tuba player.
Yeah. Scott Teague. Yep.
Teague. Yeah. His presentation was on building your studio, building your teaching studio, which was very, very straightforward, usable advice. You know, I can't think of the right word. Not usable. Usable, but
actionable. Let's go
actionable. That's a good word. Actionable advice. Where if you did these steps, it's like that will more than likely lead to a larger studio.
Right. Yeah. And that's a guy who's done it. And then Sarah was on talking about mindset. We had another guy talking about mindset and belief. And then my friend Shell and I, you know, Shell, we were
Mm-hmm.
talking about some of your money knots and like what are the money hurdles in your mind that are getting in the way from you being able to make a lot of money. And she'll be talking about that again. Arthur Brewer and I have done something interesting recently. And I have to credit Arthur because he pioneered this, but creating your own composer in residency program. So Arthur did this with a community band where he lives outside of Portland. And so I did it. I took his model and now I'm a composer in residence for a community band here in Lincoln. And so we're going to give a joint presentation on how do you do that? You know, like the idea of working with an ensemble and the way we've set it up is like guaranteed performances. They're going to read our pieces. They're going to play them. If COVID allows this band to do everything they have scheduled, I'm going to have many multiple performances of pieces this year. And I have a group to workshop with and I'm going to write for. And it's in your own backyard. So why aren't more composers working with the musicians that are where they're living? And we're going to give you a way to do that. Like, here's how you do it. So stuff like that.
I have to say, Garrett, I already enjoyed the very first Ultimate Music Business Summit, and you sold me on this one, separate from the fact that I already experienced the first one.
Well, it's going to be good. So again, musicsummit.biz, and we need to get you as a supporting podcast on it. You and I will talk when we're done recording.
Sounds cool. I'd be completely honored. Yeah. All right, Garrett. So for the last couple, we've been going for like 2 hours, almost 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
Wow. That's awesome. I like that. Before we finish off here, we got the Ultimate Music Business Summit. How can people contact you? What are your socials? Any other projects or things you want to plug? Performances?
Well, the biggest thing I'm building right now is the Music Business Summit, but Heidi K. Begay and I are also trying to serve the community of people who have graduate degrees in music who don't know what to do now. Like, they've invested a lot of time and money, and we want to help them make a pivot and be fruitful and in many ways. So I don't know yet where to send you, but if you go to theportfoliocomposer.com, you can listen to my podcast, and that's probably the best way. Get on my mailing list, and so then we can stay in communication. And I have my regular newsletter, which you have generously shared, which I completely missed last week. So that's probably the best way to do it. You can find me on Facebook and Twitter, but honestly, I'm not super active. I'm really kind of sour on social media right now and thinking about just getting off entirely because I think it fosters a lot more negativity than anything else. And I just don't want to participate in that.
I don't blame you. I don't blame you at all. And yeah, one last, plug for you too, is that the Friday 5 newsletter you send out is so, I every time I get the email, I read it, I go to the links. It's so useful. So many great resources that you provide. So I highly recommend everyone to sign up for the newsletter. And you'll be getting a lot of value from it. Definitely.
Wow. That means a lot. It really does. Thank you for letting me know that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, man. Well, look, Garrett, this has been a really cool conversation. I've enjoyed every bit of it. Thank you so much for being on here. It's a real honor, especially that I've been listening to the Portfolio Composer podcast for years. And so having you on my podcast is it's sort of surreal in a way,
It's my pleasure. It was just a great conversation. Even though we kind of got way geeky about woodworking and education and other things.
That might be some of my favorite parts.
All right. Well, we've got a drink coming in Chicago in December.
Oh, I love that. I'm ready. I'm so looking forward to it.